Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back, guys, to another edition of Keeping It Casual with Shaykh Amir. Today, we have a special episode because we got some questions that were here early on. For those of you that are new here, this is the Thursday weekly session that we do with Shaykh Amir for 30 minutes, where we have an open forum where you can send your questions beforehand or you can ask in the chat. And if you get a chance to get to them, we're going to get to them. But eventually it'll be just for members only. But for now, we're doing it as an open session for people to benefit. But eventually we'll be going private with that. So for members only, because we want to make sure that the Sheikh has, that only serious people are contacting him. Otherwise, you can get a bunch of people coming in the stream and wasting his time. You guys know how that goes. But anyways, before we get started, this episode is going to be sponsored by Arabic Grammar Unlocked. It is a text on Al-Ajrumiyya, which is a grammar guide on specifically Quranic grammar through the classical text. And Al-Ajrumiyya is one of the classical texts used when you start to study Arabic grammar. This book will be available on Amazon. The link is down below. It's a great book. It's got tons of positive reviews. Make sure you check it out. If you want to get involved with the Arabic language and you're having trouble with the grammar after you've done the basics, after you've done the Medina books, and you want to get a little edge on how to master the Arabic grammar, this would be a good place to start. And by the way, side note, it's done by my brother. So he's a good guy. Many guys have heard us talk about him on the Mad Mamluks, how he's a genuine dude. And so this is one of his projects that he does. But if you are interested, head on over to Amazon.com. Link is in the description and check out the book. All right, with all that stuff out of the way, let me bring in the saint of Chicago, Illinois.
Of Nicholas, the saint of Nicholas.
My good friend, Shaykh Amir. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum salam. Shaykh Murtada, what's going on?
Oh, mashallah. No worry, you call me a Shaykh. I feel strange now. You made me feel awkward.
You're my Shaykh, bro.
You made me feel awkward for the first time. You know what I mean? And that never happens.
That's not an easy thing to do.
So anything going on? Anything you want to talk about before? Real quick before we get started, people loved the episode part 1 of the hold on, Mahin's messaging me. I'm doing a live show.
He's gonna mess around. Block him, bro.
No, it's okay. No, I just put it on mute. But anyways, but people love the first episode that we did about your journey, and so we're going to be doing a part 2 on Saturday, and we're going to make this a series, inshallah. So if you guys missed that, go to the Mad Mamluks and make sure you check out the first part of Shaykh Amir's journey to seeking knowledge. Many people loved it, and that was one of my favorite episodes. People were engaged, and I think it's long overdue. So make sure that you guys go ahead to TMM channel and check out that last Saturday episode that we did about Shaykh Amir's journey. But let's go ahead and get right into this, Amir. So I think I sent you some questions, but let's go ahead and start with a couple of the first ones. So the first one we have is, what age do you recommend kids to start hifdh? And do you think that part-time hifdh is okay? Or do you feel like doing it full-time is necessary? And then also, what tips do you have for parents to prepare themselves and their kids before they start a memorization journey?
Yeah, I think that was actually a really good question. I know it may seem very basic and elementary. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasul al-kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First and foremost, thanks again, Mort, for bringing me on. Really appreciate it. So, first thing is, it's never too early to start a child on hifdh, and hifdh is usually something that we start in baby steps. When a child is small, they start saying words from the Quran, whether we know it or not. Their memorization process has begun the first time they hear us reciting the Quran. And then we hear them say Allahu Akbar while we're praying. We hear them try to mumble a little bit of Surah Al-Fatiha. The memorization process already began. And as they get older and as they develop, it's up to us as parents as not to overburden them, because we know we want them to memorize the Quran eventually, or a portion of it. The reason why I'm mentioning this is I've seen many people, a child is 4 years old, 5 years old, they're really, really getting upset with them with not memorizing. They have a time where they sit down with them, sit down with children, and they're like, okay, you have to get this many verses done. That's not how it is, right? We have to remember the saying of Ali radiallahu anh, where he divided. Some people attribute to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it's actually the saying of Ali radiallahu anh, wallahu alam, is that the first 7 years of the child's life, you play with them, right? Meaning that there shouldn't be super strenuous and super stressful expectations for them in this situation, the Quran, memorization of the Quran, before the age of 7. I mean, you can incite them, you can teach them, but it's not like something they should get obviously beat up for, or they shouldn't get yelled at for not memorizing enough, because it's the age of playing. The next 7 years is the age of teaching and learning, right? This is where you start teaching them how to pray, and you expect them to pray after the age of 7, or around the age of 7. There's a hadith of Rasulullah. But at the same time, you're actually incorporating small surahs, starting with the last 10 surahs, right? And then as they get to the higher side of the spectrum with the second set of 7 years, that's when we're starting to give them a little more challenging type of verses and surahs. And then when they get older, you know, the last 7 years, the third set, is where you become their friend and try to become their best friend, right? In a very natural and holistic way, without forcing it, right? Now, the last 7 years is very, very, you know, it's the first 7 years and the second 7 years are going to be very, very important on how the formation begins in the last set, in the third set of 7 years. Now, why am I mentioning all this? Is that memorization, a lot of time, of the Quran can be a very smooth transition if the child trusts the way we're teaching, and if we're very merciful in those first 7 years, right? So now what about full-time and part-time? I think every child is different. The first thing we have to do, I know we say this as parents all the time, but we should never fall into the trap of comparing other children, hifdh al-Quran, with our children. All of our children memorize differently, right? I have an 11-year-old, right? The 11-year-old memorizes in a completely different way than my 7-year-old, right? And obviously my 3-year-old just imitates the 7-year-old, or imitates me when I'm reading, and that's what they try memorizing, right? But we all learn differently. Some, like for instance, my 11-year-old wants to understand very much so, right? Before memorization. So we have to be very, very careful of making sure that if one of our relatives, our nieces, our nephews, you know, our other children is very, very good at memorizing very fast, we have to make sure that we don't force them to do the same. We have to just be like, oh, you know what? You're able to read now. You're not making any mistakes. Try memorizing this one line over here, right? And then try to focus on that one line and see how they memorize it. Eventually, you're going to come to know if the child is ready for full-time or part-time. I personally think part-time is a better option for a majority of children, not all children. Full-time is good too, but full-time requires a different type of challenge, which sometimes I see that parents are not prepared. They haven't prepared enough to reacclimate their child into school, right? So let me give you an example. You have a child who's memorizing maybe 3 times a week after school or on the weekends. That's a very good, you know, almost non-stressful way of the child memorizing, and try to teach them the meanings with it. And it becomes a very profound experience for the child, right? Because they're learning the Quran, they're understanding the Quran, they're only memorizing very, very little, right? As they get older, you can memorize more and more, right? Again, I want to mention, I may spend a little more time on this, Mort, but I think this is a great question, because us as elders, the last portion of the question is very important. So now full-time is that it requires parents to plan a little bit and reacclimate the child, and planning how reacclimation is going to take place when the child is, you know, finishing up memorization. And there's some tarbiyah that has to take place too. Number one is you have to make sure the program you have your child in is a very healthy Islamic environment for the child too. I know some of us are okay with our child getting sometimes smacked around during their memorization or beat up. I'm personally completely against that, right? And we have to make sure the environment that other children which are in that hifdh program, because our child's going to be with them about 7 to 8 hours a day, maybe even 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours a day. So we have to do a little bit of research. It requires more research. The part-time's a little different, right? You have more time with your child, and because there's more of a transition. They're coming home and then they're going back to the memorization. But I think every child is different. Now, if you see your child just memorizing Quran really, really fast, even then, I would say part-time. But if you think that, hey, I have a dedicated year, 2 years just for my child to take a break from school, do it. I think it's good, but make sure that you're taking the proper steps to reacclimate your child, back into school or whatever setting the child's going to be in, even if it's homeschooling, right? What can parents do? I think parents have to be prepared to understand that they have to. One of the main dilemmas that I saw with families and memorization is the parents don't really read Quran at home, but they expect the child to read 2 hours a day in revision. You know what I'm saying? That balance can't occur. The child has to be able to see us reading also. And we have to be able to test the child, and we have to be able to kind of, direct the child, especially when they're on breaks or if their teacher's not available. We have to be able to be a certain type of substitute, right? So what that means is that we start learning Quran. We start learning our tajweed, especially. Tajweed is probably the most important for listening to your child, because your speed may not be up to par with your child in reading, but your tajweed has to be almost up to par, or obviously preferably better. And it's not a very difficult thing. You can do it within 3 to 6 months. If you have a good program and a good plan, it's very doable, right? But we shouldn't be one of those people that don't know. And I know families like this, there's some parents I know that don't know more than 10 surahs of the Quran, but they're forcing and really pushing the child, sometimes getting physical with their child for not reviewing an hour to 2 hours a day. You know what I'm saying? The child has to see that embodiment within ourselves too. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's really important. I think it's a great question. Full-time, part-time, you can be the judge of that. If you choose full-time, make sure you're taking the proper steps while the child is memorizing, right before they finish, and when they finish, to get them reacclimated into whatever education program they're going to be resuming. And as a family, parents should just take it easy. Don't stress yourselves out. Just start little by little and start acclimating yourself with tajweed and just memorizing surahs and being merciful to your child with the Quran, right?
Okay, Jazakumullah khair. So sorry guys, I like to put the question up on the board, but unfortunately I have on images and they weren't answered there. But let me just get a couple questions from the text here real quick. So let's just ask start noise. What is the best and most reliable book or authentic narration to learn about the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Obviously there's many. There's classical books where many people know of, but the contemporary book that I would tell many brothers and sisters, because it's translated, it's a bit of a compendium, meaning it's a lot. It's 2 volumes, but Dr. Muhammad Ali Salabi has a book of the Seerah of Rasulullah, Muhammad Ali Salabi, very detailed, very thorough, cited with books of hadith and books of Seerah where he derived it from. Al-Rahiq al-Makhtum is good, but for some people don't find the language and the scenarios and examples that are given very relevant. But it's still a great book, obviously. But for me, I always suggest to people Muhammad Ali Salabi's book on Seerah of Rasulullah. Muhammad Ali Salabi.
Okay, inshallah, we'll give that to you. The second one here, what are your favorite dhikr and salawat to recite?
Thank you, Sabil Ahmed. I met him. I heard him last week too. So if it's a personal question, For me, it's different every week, but obviously sending salutations on Muhammad sallallahu is a winner all the time. It is one of the best sources of ibadah. It's one of the best types of ibadah. It also is something that brings a lot of blessing to the person. One of my teachers said something really beautiful, and you guys can actually search the hadith and narration about this, or the saying of the Sahabi. But one of my stages in Egypt, I was really getting into my studies, but there was something lacking as far as purification of the soul and dhikr. And even though I was doing dhikr, I just was really busy with studying, and it became very academic for me. So I was looking for what we know as a murabbi, somebody who you sit with and they teach you, obviously the Quran and Sunnah, but with the direction of purifying your soul and encourage you to stand up for tahajjud and all that good stuff. And I was corresponding with him, and he was not available because he was in a different city, but he said, try to send lots of salawat on Rasulullah at least 100 times a day. He was just talking from experience. He's not saying this is from the Sharia. And he's saying that sending lots of salutations on Muhammad sallallahu, he said, me personally, I was in the same situation as you. And then I started naturally gravitating to the action of Rasulullah sallallahu, meaning that I would start practicing something, and I would look in the hadith that I would see, or in the Shama'il of Tirmidhi, and I would see that I was emulating Muhammad sallallahu without knowing that he actually was doing it, right? So it's like saying that the more salutations you send on Muhammad sallallahu, it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does your tarbiyah of Rasulullah sallallahu until you find a murabbi, right? Someone to do your tarbiyah. But salawat on Muhammad sallallahu and istighfar, man. We can't do enough istighfar. Muhammad sallallahu used to do istighfar 70 times minimum a day, and none of us are exempt from istighfar. We should always be doing so. Salawat on Muhammad sallallahu and istighfar, you can't go wrong with those two. Thank you, Sabila.
Awesome. All right, Jazakumullah khair. So let's go to some of the questions that were mailed in. There's one here that I wanted to read. Sorry, I can't put it on the board. I don't have the ability yet, but I'll fix that next week. But it says, I wanted to ask how one can take student loans, speaking as a UK, not US student, since they don't offer any other support to help you pay the fees. A lot of people have told me to take it, but I feel unsettled. Jazakallah khair. So I guess the question is about loans. How can one take student loans? Meaning, if this is going to be riba on the loans and so forth.
Yeah, I know. The setup is slightly different in the UK. I know Sheikh Hatim Haddad, and there's a brother named Sheikh Dr. Omar something. I can't remember his last name. We could probably put it in later, but they've discussed it extensively for the brothers in the UK. But there's certain things that are overlapping as for in the United States. So there's a few different types of loans that someone could take, right? As far as student loans for university. There's a section in the Sharia which, we research, which is subsidized types of loans by the government, and those that are non-subsidized. Just remember, the ones that are subsidized themselves, there's a few options. If in the UK, and I don't know exactly how it is in the UK or universities, I know universities are a little cheaper, but exhausting all options, financial aid, right? In the US, we have something where you can apply for financial aid, you can apply for grants, you can apply for scholarships based on your income, right? And how much you make yearly. And based on that, you can get some financial assistance, right? From the government, and sometimes even from the institution itself. Secondly is that in the United States, and from what I understand in the UK also, there's one type of loan which is you have approximately 6 months to pay back, right? So that's not going to follow the contemporary loan, which would be considered un-Islamic, because after you're finished and you make your first payment, you're finished with college and you make your first payment, 6 months from then, you're getting an opportunity to pay off your loans without any interest, right? So in that situation, it in itself is not a haram contract, but there is a possibility in falling into haram because lots of people are not able to pay back in 6 months, right? So subsidized, if it's subsidized, and there's certain types of loans where it's, after the age of retirement, if you weren't able to pay it back, then it's not considered, you don't have to pay any interest on it. Or if, God forbid, you pass away and no one else is going to inherit that, then that doesn't follow the track of it of the loan being itself a haram ribawi loan, because if by the demise of the individual or the passing away of the individual, they're basically forgiven, right? So based on the type of loan that you take, but if it's non-subsidized and you're giving extra money for money, you're paying extra money for money because that's what riba actually is, then that would be a loan that's not allowed Islamically. But if it's subsidized, that's a different story. You know, and just take your best judgment. If you're still uncomfortable, do the best of your ability. I know some brothers in the UK that I spoke to, they have a gap year before university, right, where they work, and then they go to school for a year, and they save up to the best of their ability. And later on, they may take a loan. It'll be easier for them to pay off that loan. The other is, I personally know a friend, and he had a better, you know, he got a better job opportunity because he would have a gap year in between each year of university. I know that seems like a lot. Generally, I think the university in the UK is about 3 years. So he did a gap year. He did 1 year of university. He had a gap year and he was working. So by the time he graduated, he had like 2 or 3 years of experience while going to school. So as he graduated college and he was completely done university, he was making a lot more money than he would make if he just graduated and didn't have gap years, right? So I think, you know, it's good that you're being careful, but you have to look at if it's a subsidized. Just make sure you see if it's a subsidized loan or if it's a non-subsidized loan.
All right, Jazakallah khair. Sheikh, another question. This was on a YouTube comment by Oladap. So it says, Assalamu alaikum. Please, I want to ask you a question. I saw a Christian post and he said if musical instruments is banned in Islam, i.e. bells, why does the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would receive revelation, he would hear some through bell ringing?
Very good.
Yeah.
So when Rasulullah mentioned this hadith, a lengthy hadith of the types and the way revelation would come to Rasulullah, he said that the ringing of the bell, one of them is, and he said that it is the most difficult upon him, is that it would sound like the ringing of an intense bell. So what that actually means is, have you guys ever taken metal and you hit the metal and it has that ringing sound, right? There's tools that, you know, that make that sound, even in like projects and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't mean that it was literally a bell and he's listening to it and it's music. The closest sound that he could describe to us was like the ringing of the bell. Allah wasn't ringing a bell or giving him a musical medium as a receptacle of the Quran sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rather, the closest sound that he can describe to us was that it was an intense ringing in his ears, which if you were to give an example or analogy of what it would sound like, he said it was like the ringing of a bell. Cool. It doesn't mean that it was actually a bell or some musical tune in the bell.
Okay. All right.
Intense ringing in the ears.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So just to recap, it doesn't mean like he actually heard like church bells going off. It meant like like imagine, you know, in cartoon characters where like they take a thing over your head and go dong, like they hit that, like the whole shell shock. That's what it is, like the shell shock in your head, and you get punched in the face.
Into it, yes, sir.
Yeah, you ever been punched in the face before, Shaykh Amir? And you get punched that first time you get punched.
I've been punched in the face.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've been punched in the face before. It's a rude awakening. We all need it sometimes.
Rude awakening. Okay. Okay. So we had another a question in the text. I want to go up and get it. Salam brothers, from my brother Oz, all the way from down under in Australia. Salam brothers, Sheikh, did you hear how coffee started because of Islamic mystics wanting to stay up to read Quran? Also, my question is, if there are good jinns, what do they do? Ooh,
very interesting question, OZ. Wow, now I could put a picture behind OZ. I always see his comments. Now I see a picture of him sitting on a boulder. So OZ, thank you for the question. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So historically, I know there's many different depictions of individuals who had founded coffee. Some say that there were people from Yemen. Actually, Mort is probably a better person to ask because he's our history buff. Him and Sim are history buffs. And when it comes to Yemen, Mort knows everything about Yemen. Some say there were some other parts on the outskirts of different countries in Africa. But yes, originally when they researched this plant and they utilized it, they wanted to use it actually for qiyam al-layl and acts of worship, because they wanted to find out first and foremost the psychoactive ingredient in it, which is caffeine. Is it allowed for us to use this to get rid of our sleep so we can worship, right? And obviously the scholars later on came to the agreement that it was okay. Some of them were not okay with it, very small fraction of them. But now the general consensus is, coffee, there's nothing wrong with drinking it in limits, and as long as you don't have any health conditions. The other is, the next part of the question is good jinns, right? What do they do? That's a good question. They do kind of what we do as human beings, right? If there are good jinns, which there are, right? There's believers amongst jinns, and there's shayateen amongst jinns, right? So just think of jinns as a species, just like human beings. And then from amongst them are shayateen, and from amongst them are believers, right? And from amongst them, obviously, are just like human beings. The only thing different about jinns, they're more tribal than human beings. And they do everything we do. They procreate, they have their own world, they have their own life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about them that they can see us, but we can't see them, right? But just think of them as just human beings in a different realm. The only advantage they have over us is they can see us, if that's even an advantage, but we can't see them, which I think is advantageous for us too. Jinn baby mama.
Okay, yeah, our homie Maliki Click is here, and he's got some stories about jinns. I think one of his tweets went viral about jinns and a cab driver jinn talking to him, and crazy stuff. By the way, just real to add on, look, the coffee plant probably came from Ethiopia, out of the Habash. But if you know, Ethiopia also had a kingdom with Yemen, the Aksum Empire with Al-Himyar. So, but the Yemenis were the ones to originally cultivate the plant, because they took advantage of the fact that they couldn't grow other things in the terrain in Yemen, especially in Taiz and Ib, where they had like the mountain regions. So they grew the coffee beans there, and that for almost 200 years, that was the only place available to get coffee from around the world. Actually, the term mocha or mocha, it came from in Mocha in Yemen, which is like the port in the Red Sea they would use to ship out the beans. So yes, I mean the Ottoman Empire also took it from there, from Yemen, but the Yemenis were the ones to cultivate it. But most likely it was a plant in Ethiopia and Africa, where it came close to Yemen.
Where you have it. Well, yeah. You have a question about mocha, if you don't mind me asking. So why is it now? Is it just a cool name that they call like coffee with chocolate mocha now, or does it have to do with like Ethiopia or what's going on?
Well, Arabic coffee, they called it mocha because it came from Mocha in Yemen, like the area where they poured it off from. So they just became the synonym for coffee.
So now
Arabica.
Cafe mocha, if you get a mocha, it means coffee with chocolate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's like coffee flavored.
Oh, is that what's up with the chocolate part? Are they indirectly being like talking about Ethiopians and we don't know?
Ooh, I don't know. That I don't know about that. That's modern history.
It's a compliment, though. Chocolate's
okay.
A compliment.
All right, great. So I think we have time for one last question, and I think let me go up, and there was a question here. Sorry, I missed it because we got 2 minutes left before we wrap this baby up. Whoops. I think we got them all, actually. There was one that I think they had emailed to me, but I couldn't get to it, so I apologize. We'll get to it next time, inshallah ta'ala. Right now, I just, it's kind of tough for me to do it while I'm streaming. So, Shaykh Amir, I'll let you have the last and final words where we wrap up. Any nasiha that you want to share to people? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, man. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, for posting all your questions. By the way, Maliki Click, I really want to hear from you and some of your stories. But in general, I think that all platforms we have to use as a source of ibadah. So Jazakallahu khairan Mort for bringing this into fruition. It's really making me become a little more active and get a little more in tune with Muslims online and just on social media, and keeping it as clean as possible at the same time. There was a phase where I was getting a little lazy, and just I was realizing that now I have to just kind of be a little alert on Thursday evenings too. So I think it's all good, man. It's awesome. And I'm really loving this experience, to be honest with you. I'm not really too tech savvy. I don't really know too much about cameras nor audio, but I'm starting to see the wisdom behind all of this. You know what I'm saying? I know it sounds a little weird because it's 2020 and everyone's in this technological age, and I'm a late bloomer, that's for sure. But
we know you spent your time in the deserts of Mauritania for too long, so we know.
But I'm
actually
starting to like this medium, and I think e-learning has a lot to do with it. But whatever the situation is, I know we're going through this pandemic. Everyone stays strong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's his world. He does whatever he pleases. And it's just none of our business. We just roll with the punches, and we just have our trust in Allah. And everything is a blessing in disguise for us. And let's just have a good time. You know what I'm saying? Allah protect all of us and our families.
Allahumma ameen. Okay, all right. Jazakumullah khair, Shaykh Amir, and to everyone else that was here. Remember, we're going to do this every Thursdays, so make sure you get your questions in beforehand, because the ones that come in before, we're definitely going to get to them. The ones that come in the text, aside from the super chats, we're not sure when we can get to them. So if you missed it this time and you wanted to get it, throw it into my email box, muzzybuzzshow@gmail.com. Or if you're a member, become a member on Patreon or the YouTube channel. You can ask directly and interact with the Sheikh. We have a brother who's going to be talking with the Sheikh after the show, so you get access to even the further commentary later on. But at any point, if you have a question, send it over and we'll try to get to it on the weekly stream here on Thursdays. Other than that, remember that we have our weekly show on Sunday, which is my show, and then Wednesdays for the Mad Mamluks. This Saturday, we're going to do part 2 of Shaykh Amir's journey, and this is going to be from Mauritania to India.
Yeah.
Oh, Dawlat al-Hind. The funny part, that's the great part. Because, me and Shaykh Amir, somebody asked, Shaykh Amir is Indian. Like, we are actually Indians as well, too. Like, so my family is Hadrami that are Indian, but we're from the same place in India. So we all kind of grew up in the same area. So yes, he is. But we'll talk about, you'll get to know about that on this week's show on Saturday. So when you tune into the Mad Mamluks, because we're going to go in detail, we're going to let Shaykh Amir do all the talking. We're going to try not to interrupt him, and we're going to be serious. No more calling him the blue-eyed devil, because, that's just not, it's only an inside joke, but we want this one to be serious.
Only you're allowed.
No. I think on these shows, we got to keep you serious, because this is the journey of your knowledge. So we want people to benefit and not be distracted by our jahil words. Me and Sim have a problem. But anyways, yes, Maliki Click, he is. Well, I've been telling him to take a DNA test. I'm pretty sure he's got some, I call him the blue-eyed blank, because I know he's got some other DNA in him. He doesn't take a DNA test. Yeah. But anyways, thank you all for joining in. Jazakumullah khair. And we will catch you on the next episode of Keeping It Casual with Shaykh Amir. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.